Good day everyone, Greg Satilla here for CRPGLegends.com. It has been over 17 years since Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic has been released, and I still remember buying it bundled with my original Xbox during the 2003 holiday season. It was a defining moment in my gaming history. I took it home with me and played KOTOR over the holiday break from university, and it pretty much consumed that entire period, as I remember finishing the game twice, completing both a light side and a dark side playthrough. Does the fact that this game has imprinted important memories in my life have an effect on how I look back at it today? Well, of course it does. I'm only human. But after coming back for a couple more playthroughs, I still believe this is an absolutely great game. It definitely doesn't do everything right, but it does so many things great and has so many high points and such great characters that we tend not to remember the low points. We are going to touch both upon the highs and the lows of this game. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was developed by BioWare, a company whose name is synonymous with great role-playing games. Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Dragon's Age, Mass Effect, and of course Knights of the Old Republic. BioWare is also a source of civic pride for me as an Edmontonian. I have long been proud that literally just down the road from me was the home of the team that developed so many of my favorite games. I didn't have this long-running history with the studio back in 2003 though, and at that time you knew that any company willing to take on the Star Wars license were going to be under the microscope. This was during a time when the prequels were being ripped apart by many Star Wars fans, long before Hello There would become a crowning achievement in meme history, before the kids of the period would grow up to champion the prequels as their favorites. People were looking for a great Star Wars game, and BioWare delivered despite the fact that their favorite characters were not included. There was no Luke, no Han, no Leia, no 3PO and R2, so BioWare had to deliver their own cast of memorable characters, and they definitely delivered. Let's talk a little about the nuts and bolts of this game. This was BioWare's second 3D role-playing game, its first being Neverwinter Nights, and its first big console RPG. This, like previous BioWare RPG games, was using a modified version of the D&D rule set to govern the gameplay, so you knew that behind the action there was a lot of 20-sided dice being rolled. You knew going in that you were looking at 20 levels of progression, which would mean there would be limits on what one character could accomplish on their own. They may be able to wield godly powers, but they may not be able to hack that computer, so you would need to have the help of your party members. Now, using a tried and true system like the Dungeons and Dragons system is all well and good, but it doesn't mean anything if the gameplay doesn't play well. BioWare did a good job of making a system that worked well and wasn't frustrating, and also worked well on consoles. The ability to queue up 3 additional rounds of moves for each character was nice, so you didn't feel like you were always having to plan the next round. However, you could easily pause and change commands on the fly. Combat could be paused at any time to ensure you set up your party correctly, and could interject with a well-timed heal. You also saw the beginnings of the system where you could automate your characters to act a certain way. This was basic at the time, but if you wanted one character to sit back and focus on force powers and healing, you could designate that and focus mainly on your character during combat. Plus, the fact that this was using a D&D rule set meant that there would be times that your character could just whiff on an attack no matter how powerful they were. Combat also looked and sounded great. It actually still does. The environmental textures may be lacking these days, but the characters still look surprisingly good, and the sound is still out of this world. So even today, combat is a ton of fun and paced quickly. It isn't slow and lurching like some of the older games feel today. Rounds go by quickly. Sometimes it can feel like you die unfairly if you get a series of bad rolls, but other times you feel like the god of death, cutting through enemies like a warm knife through butter. The force powers that were implemented are fun, although some are definitely a little more powerful than others, and the right combination can be used fairly early on to give your character quite an advantage. For melee characters, Flurry is the obvious choice for a spam ability, and when combined with your abilities to increase speed, it can lead to a lot of single round victories. But you still weren't unbeatable, you were still bound to the luck of the dice. Plus, it's fun to choke people, or force lightning them, or even just a good old fashioned force push. This game felt like Star Wars. Characters felt like Jedis or mercenaries or Sith. There are basically 3 classes to choose from in the game, and then 3 subclasses of Jedi after that. You're either a soldier, a scoundrel, or a scout, and later on a Jedi Guardian, Consular, or Sentinel. Each class determines how feats and skills are doled out, changes some of the default answers your characters can give, and certain perks are limited to certain classes. You could still hand out your ability points how you wanted to, so you could still stack your scoundrel with strength if you really wanted. I tended to lean towards soldier or scout because chances are once you become a Jedi, you're going to put that blaster away and focus on melee combat with a lightsaber, but that's just my logic. I was never one to stand in the back and use force powers for support in these games. Also, I found there was little reason to invest points into something like security. While you could pick locks and get a small amount of XP, you could also bash open every locked door or container with no fear of damaging the contents within, unlike in the sequel. Soldier Guardian was my standard, but I have branched out from there on other playthroughs and done Scout Sentinel as well. Now, one thing this game really didn't need was mini-games, and we get a few of them. One that is pretty fun, and one that is pretty lame, and one that is actually fairly instrumental in shaping the future of mini-games going forward. Swoop Racing is actually not bad at all. It is featured on 3 planets, and it can be kind of challenging. I did have some trouble setting the track record on Manon. The other one is a small little space battle game that pops up from time to time when you go to travel on your ship. This game feels like padding. It doesn't control super well, it isn't very fun, and it's random, so it takes you out of whatever you're trying to accomplish at the time. The last, of course, is the card game Pazaak, which you will gather cards for as you play through the main game. It's not particularly strategic, but it does require a bit of strategy, and I did find myself sitting down for a game of Pazaak 2 or 3 times on nearly every planet. Without Pazaak in KOTOR, I don't know if down the road we would have seen the implementation of other card games into RPGs, like Gwent in The Witcher 3. This game was also the first time I remember the morality system being a big part of a game, and I will touch upon morality systems and their influence on games at some point in a future video. But I find that in a Star Wars game, it just seems to make sense to use a morality system as you wrestle between the good and bad sides of the Force. In most video games, I'm almost always the good guy. I want to be the hero. It feels bad to be the villain. KOTOR is definitely a game where you have the opportunity to do some pretty horrible things to the NPCs that populate the planets and even your own party members. Stealing the last possessions from a widowed woman and selling them for your own gain, leaving her and her family with nothing, and most likely inevitable death on Tatooine is just one of many examples. Your character's appearance will also slowly change depending on whether you are a member of the light side or the dark side, as you become very pale and creepy as you descend into darkness. How you play the game controls how your party members interact with you, and even at times affects which party members will be a member of your party. On my most recent Evil playthrough, I killed Juhani before she joined my party, which led to some scripted moments that I'd never come across before. She is also not the only party member you will have an opportunity to kill before you get to the end. Of course, how you play the game determines whether you will get the good ending or the bad ending, although it would have been nice to have the option for a more morally neutral ending if you'd played the game more with the disposition of a character like Jolee Bindo. Sadly, this is not an option though. Weapons and armor are upgradable, and you will find different ways to upgrade them throughout the game, and you can remove upgrades and install new ones. The lightsabers have a long list of crystals that are available via quest rewards, vendors, hidden caves, and by slaying Dark Jedi. And I found myself tinkering with my party's lightsabers a lot in order to min-max them to get the best performance out of them that I could. Some crystals are better for certain situations than others, so it can be optimal to change them when you get to a workbench. The game looks and sounds very Star Wars-y. They did a great job with the look of the aliens, Rodians, Wookiees, Hutts, Gamorreans, Twi'leks, and more. They even used some fake languages to voice most of these creatures, and while these languages were just repeated phrases, they did add authenticity to the NPCs. Voice acting is pretty top tier all around. The party members sound great, and so do most of the NPCs. The announcer at the dueling ring on Terrace was one of my personal highlights.
Ladies and gentlemen, draw your eyes to the center ring. We have a very special presentation in store for you. You've seen him lose night after night after night, but this time he's after fresh meat. In this corner I give you Jedi Duncan!
The sound of ships and lightsabers and blasters are straight out of the movies, and so is the music for the most part, which rises at the right time to highlight battles and falls into the background when needed. The different settings you go to throughout the game are great too, despite the lack of graphical features at the time. The upper cities of Terrace are clean and sterile in comparison to the lower cities with their swoop gangs. The deserts of Tatooine are bright and open, and the dense undercover of Kashyyyk is dark and foggy. It feels like Star Wars in a very good way. Plus, I will never get over whipping out my lightsabers. The story is really quite good and acts as a great vehicle to interact with the amazingly colorful cast of really memorable characters. At its heart, you are a Republic soldier or scout or scoundrel whose ship is attacked while transporting a very important Jedi named Bastila, and you crash on the planet of Terrace. You and a fellow soldier are tasked with rescuing her and taking her to a Jedi training facility on Dantooine. Once there, due to your Force sensitivity and some urgency in the war between the Jedi and the Sith, you are rushed through Jedi training and sent off into the galaxy to find these star maps, which will lead you to the source of power for the Sith and their evil leader, Darth Malak. Now, while the overarching story is actually pretty good in its own right, it's the smaller moments along the way and interacting with your party members and them interacting with each other that really makes this game shine. Even your ship is awesome. You acquire it early in the game, stealing it from a rich smuggler that thinks himself a king on Terrace by the name of Davik Kang. It looks great, it has a great name, the Ebon Hawk, and it comes with its own history that will draw different types of attention as you travel around the galaxy. Along the way, you will meet and probably acquire up to 9 party members. The self-righteous and arrogant Jedi Bastila with a special battle meditation ability that is sought after by both sides. The neurotic Republic war hero Carth Onasi, who is always certain that he will once again be betrayed by whoever he lets close. The duo of the young 15-year-old Twi'lek Mission Vao and her Wookiee compatriot Zalbar. A Mandalorian named Canderous Ordo who loves nothing more than defeating his enemies and the glory of combat. A morally gray Jedi by the name of Jolee Bindo who has a lifetime of stories to fill you in on. A Jedi named Juhani who is struggling with the temptation of the dark side, and a couple of droids. The well-mannered T3-M4 who reminds me a lot of a familiar astromech droid from the movies, and the absolute fan favorite HK-47, a murderous assassin droid that has a history of violently killing his own masters.
Extrapolation. It would seem that we are at least worthy of curiosity for the moment. I would much rather this get bloody, Master, but it is your call.
These characters are well fleshed out with full backstories, and they really come to life through your dialogue with them, or even better at times will be the dialogue between 2 of the party members you bring along with you. It is enough to make you want to play the game over and over with different combinations of party members just to see how they treat one another. Carth always seems to offend whoever he talks with. HK-47 hates non-violent solutions to problems. Bastila is preachy. Jolee Bindo is cynical. It's really just a treat when the party members talk to one another.
Bold talk from a broken-down mercenary who was serving at Davik's heel. I'd call you his pet cat hound. But they have enough loyalty not to turn on their masters.
Insults? Maybe if your master had trained your lightsaber to be as quick as your tongue, you could have escaped those Vulkars, you spoiled little Jedi princess.
Chances are you will find a combination that you will like, but in some levels you are forced to take certain party members, and that is not a bad thing because it allows you to see more of the personality of these characters. Your party is pretty complicit in your actions if you do decide to do evil things. Sometimes they will make an attempt to stop you, but for the most part, if you decide to kill someone, they will still join in. Carth might not like the idea of you murdering an innocent person with a bounty on their head, but he will still whip out his blaster and start firing shots the moment you engage in combat. There are limited options for becoming romantically involved as well. As a female character, you can romance Carth, and as a male character, you can romance Bastila. I did notice when you are a guest of Davik Kang and you go to his slave quarters, you cannot get a same-sex massage, despite their A, desire to make sure all guests are pleased in order to not be punished, and B, the fact they are supposed to be slaves. Not sure what kind of slave quarter Davik is running here, but the ability to say no says it isn't as bad as it's made out to be. This is something we have obviously seen change in games. There are far more options in future games for expanded sexual relations that aren't based simply on being the opposite sex. As the gaming industry goes forward, we're seeing far more options for sexual relations and more people are being represented, and none of this is a bad thing. So just remember that KOTOR is still a little bit dated in this regard. Some of the side quests, although lacking depth, are a lot of fun. Like the wife who is just so fed up with her husband who is always flirting with other women and then getting her to fix his hunting droids, so she sets them up so they'll kill him on his next hunt while she leaves the planet. Even if he survives, she don't care. She's gonna be off the planet when he comes back.
I say leave him.
You're pretty heartless for such a pretty lady, you know.
I take it back. Let's congratulate his wife.
Commentary. I say we blast the meat bag and save you the trouble, Master.
Quests like this are a lot of fun, and even though the side quests are mainly fetch quests or kill person A, they do help with the world building despite being quick and easy. Your party members also have side quests to take part in, and they really help to round out the characters. One of the exceptional ones is when Jolie Bindo finds out that one of his old friends is on trial for the murder of a young woman, and the investigation and trial really gives you some moral conundrums. While not all the party members' quests are exceptional, they all tend to give you a much better understanding of your party members and their motivations. The game touches upon some pretty heavy themes as we play through. Zerka Corporation is found on pretty much every planet, and they are this massive interplanetary conglomerate working with the Sith to maximize their own profit and putting smaller local businesses on these planets out of work. On Kashyyyk, they are involved in the Wookiee slave trade, which once again is another topic brought up. The Wookiees are being captured and made to work as slaves, belittled and devalued by the Zerka Corporation. When you walk around Kashyyyk with Zalbar in your party, people will call you a Wookiee lover and demean him in front of you. It is a strong message regarding racism, and it is still very relevant in this day. We also see one human ship captain is stuck working in debt servitude for another trader because his crew hasn't returned to pay his debts. Of course, we later find out his crew was murdered to keep the skillful captain in debt slavery. On Manon, we see a planet that is so bent on remaining neutral in order to maximize their profits for their medical supplies that they don't realize that they are allowing their youth to be subverted by the Sith in order to make their planet easier to control down the road. And on Taris, we see how the planet reinforces class structure and is once again largely racist, as we see humans living on the shining city tops where everything is polished, people get a view of the sky, and aliens are shunned, while the lower cities are dark and dirty ghettos run by the swoop gangs and living off the recycled garbage of the upper city. And even worse is the undercity, where society is at its most basic, and people live in the shadows of the upper city, unable to see the sky and dealing with Rakghoul disease while living in squalor. This is not entirely subtle, but it is also not exactly shoved in your face. These are just a few of the examples, but the game is littered with this kind of depth. It isn't up to the same level that modern games do it, like Red Dead Redemption 2 or The Witcher 3, but it was still there, and for the tools available, they did a great job of making me think. It also made the evil choices a little more weighty when you played that way. Even as an evil character, I couldn't bring myself to leave the planet in the hands of the slave traders, although I think I managed to do it without getting any light side points, which was pretty nice. One of the criticisms, though, that I can level at the game is that the inventory system is a bit of a nightmare. I like to call it the kitchen sink inventory system, where you can carry everything in the kitchen sink in it. There is no limits here. You can pick up every piece of loot you find in the game, and it goes into this large list of items. The items are grouped together, but you might have to scroll through hundreds of items to find the one item you are looking for, but it can be really frustrating finding items. The game also does a poor job with its villains. Darth Malak does a serviceable job, but he could have been so much better. A lot of problems with villains in games is that you don't interact with them enough early on in the game, so when something potentially dramatic is revealed later, it lacks weight. Such is the case with this game. Even when one of the big twists of the game is revealed and further character building of Malak could potentially begin, we still don't really get a good connection with him. We could have started to see some flashbacks about how Malak and his relationship with his former master Revan affects your interactions with him. I know BioWare put a lot of weight on their plot revelation, but there was still plenty of time after to really round out Malak. He just comes off as generic bad guy with a facial deformity. I don't even think we ever learned how he got his facial deformity. Was there something on the cutting room floor I'm missing out on? Plus, his super generic apprentice, Darth Bandon, might be the most forgettable person in the entire game. Did any of you who played this game even remember who Darth Bandon was? I didn't think so. The only other big gripe I have is when you have to do an underwater ocean walk on Manaan and a brief spacewalk later on in the game on the spaceship Leviathan. It just slows your character down for one cool space shot and one plot point. I wish they could have done it a better way, but it really just is a minor nuisance. There is one funny story I want to tell about one section of the game where your ship is captured and you have to select one person from your party to rescue the rest of the team. I chose Jolee Bindo to rescue us, and when I took control of him, he was stripped of all his clothes and is just running around in his underwear. So I have shirtless Jolee Bindo running around, good old No Nips Jolee saving the day topless. Meanwhile, when someone like Carth is disrobed, he's wearing some fancy full-piece space underwear, and my main character gets some awesome-looking dark side space pajamas, but Jolee's running around with no shirt on. I was almost tempted to play Jolee with no clothes on for the rest of the game, as Jedi robes provide very little armor as it is, but I chose to give old No Nips his clothes back. Hey, it's cold in space. Maybe I do look at this game with rose-tinted glasses and heavy nostalgia, but I still think that this is one of the best RPGs I've ever played. It takes the Star Wars license and does fun things with it. It created its own story. It has such a rich world to play with, and it really adds to it. The characters are among my favorites in gaming, and that is one of BioWare's real strengths. You will see it again when we talk about Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and even Jade Empire. Is this game legendary? With a resounding hell yeah it is! This was a high point in role-playing games. This game made the Xbox the must-have console for a lot of gamers. Also, unlike some of the other games I have covered, this one sold well. People got their mitts on it and loved it. Even those who never finished it seem to remember it fondly. This game, due to its license, created many more RPG fans and really pushed the genre forward. If you haven't played it, go get a copy. It's cheap and it's worth a playthrough. Play it on PC, which is what I recently did. The only mod I used was one that allowed modern resolutions. It is also backwards compatible for Xbox One, and you can find a copy on the Microsoft Store. Just be aware that reloading and autosave on the Xbox, there is a bug that might cause some of your inventory items to disappear. I don't think anyone who remotely enjoys Star Wars would not want to play this game. It may not look like modern games, but I'm pretty sure you will enjoy it just as much. There is a heart to this game that really resonates with people. Mention of the characters in this game will get a lot of gamers out there gushing about the moments they remember, and that is something special. We may have been able to watch the exploits of Luke, Han, Leia, Obi-Wan, Anakin, but we get to fight alongside Bastila, Carth, Jolee Bindo, HK-47 and the crew, and we cared for them just as much. So thanks again everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the page. Listed below I have the website, the Twitter page, the Twitch stream, and my Patreon page. And if you really enjoy these videos and you want to see more of them, please think of subscribing to my Patreon. It would really help me out a lot. Thanks a lot. See you next time.